You're listening to Extinction Radio FM. Listen to the podcast at extinctionradio.com.
Excellent. Thanks for that. Myrn, I'd like to bring you in. You've got a question for Paul?
Yeah, I do, actually. It's about abrupt climate change, of course. And, Guy McPherson goes around and he mentions you in all of his talks because of the 6 degrees in 10 years.
Yes.
And I recently saw a presentation from the American Geophysical Union that took place in December, where another scientist, and I wish I could remember his name, mentioned this paleo record from Greenland ice cores, I think it is, where there was a 6-degree rise within 10 years.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering, was that a prediction? Did you intend that? Like, I've watched your video of it a couple of times, and it's my impression that you are saying that this could happen, rather than making a specific prediction that it will happen. And I wondered if you could just comment on that whole set of...
Yes. Well, the events in Greenland, as recorded, like the Greenland ice core has a record going back about 120, maybe 130,000 years ago. Antarctica goes back further. The ice is thicker. There's less snowfall, so the layers are building up more slowly. The ice has been on the continent for a longer period of time. So that record goes back at least 800,000 years, approaching a million years. Now, in these records specifically for Greenland, they show very large temperature swings, a lot between about 70,000 and 40,000 years ago, in these so-called DO oscillations, or Dansgaard-Oshur, two climate scientists, DO, Dansgaard-Oshur oscillations. And basically, they saw a recurring pattern, and that pattern was it would be cold, and then the temperature, as recorded in the proxy in the ice on Greenland, and it was extracted from isotopes of oxygen, those type of records, but it's been verified against many other proxy records. The temperature would rise typically 5 to 6 degrees, would stay there for several hundred years in a lot of cases, and then would drop back down to the colder temperatures. In one particular case, the temperature rise was about 16 degrees Celsius. So that's recorded over the Greenland ice cap. So what is happening? So if you look at what is happening today, we're getting a lot of new phenomena in climate science. We're getting a lot of unexpected things occurring. So, for example, over Greenland just a few years ago, in the summer, almost the entire surface of the ice cap had air temperatures above 0 degrees. So there was melting on 97% of the surface of the ice cap, and that melting would result in water pooling and would lower the albedo or reflectivity of the ice cap significantly. Now, you have to kind of ask yourself, what would the ice core record show if these events lasted a longer period of time? So I think the key thing is everybody focuses on a global temperature.
Right.
Okay, so yeah, initially I was talking about this 5 to 6 degree temperature rise over a decade or two being very, very being, what the Earth is capable of doing. And then I started looking a lot more seriously and deeply into what's happening in today's climate system. And we're seeing lots of very unusual events, unusual from a scientific standpoint. For example, the methane-caused blowholes in Siberia, a recent paper documenting the slowdown of the Gulf Stream, essentially, the meridional overturning circulation currents. And of course, there's all the work that is showing that the jet streams in the atmosphere have been slowing down and becoming much wavier as a direct result of the Arctic temperature amplification. The Arctic's been warming at about a degree per decade in the last few decades. The average temperature of the global average temperature long term has been about 0.17 degrees Celsius per decade. So that ratio 1 to 0.17 is about 6 to 1. If you look at the last decade and a half, where the global temperature has risen less, slightly under 0.1 degrees Celsius, in that ratio, the Arctic has not slowed down. It's still rapidly rising in temperature. So this, of course, changes the heat balance to the equator. It changes the nature of the jet streams, which carry about 2/3 of the heat from the equator to the North Pole, and the ocean currents, which carry about 1/3 of the heat. Now, what people don't talk about with the waviness of the jet streams is that represents an enormous feedback to warming the Arctic, because warm air is propagating much higher latitudes in the ridges of these jet streams. And in the troughs of these jet streams, the cold Arctic air is penetrating much further south. So this represents an enormous mixing, because whether you're moving hot air north or cold air south, the net effect is that the Arctic is warming even more. So the jet stream waviness is attributed to the initial Arctic temperature amplification, which is because the whole Arctic is getting dark. But this waviness is another enormous feedback. So if you look at areas of the Arctic, there's large temperature anomalies of 20 degrees Celsius warmer than normal over large regions of the Arctic, and these will last, an entire season. So if, over Greenland with such an event, you have to ask yourself, what is that going to show up as in the ice core? And one could argue that it is those measurements, if they occur for long enough, will be imprinted in the ice. So, in future measurements that look at what's happening today, we'll record those as large temperature swings. So I think judging by the fractured and broken nature of the jet streams in both the northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere, it leads me, my present thinking is that we've entered early stages of abrupt climate change, and I would not be surprised at all if we had global average temperatures that was 5 or 6 degrees warmer in 10 or 20 years from today. If you look at the Arctic sea ice volume, most projections show ice going by 2020 or earlier. Once sea ice is gone for the first year, the warming of the oceans will spike upwards. Sea ice will be gone for longer of the year. Within a decade, I would say it's gone year-round, and this would be, if this happened, this would be carrying us through one of these abrupt climate changes with a much warmer temperature and an unrecognizable weather system.
I'm now accepting the reality of the surreal.